I was bleeding, and I knew something was seriously wrong. The words barely left my lips before the nurses rushed around me, their faces pale, eyes flicking to the monitors that beeped in a frantic rhythm. My body felt like it was shutting down piece by piece. Every pulse, every heartbeat felt like it was slipping further from me. The doctors were hovering, whispering urgently, but all I could hear was the pounding in my ears. "Emily, you need a blood transfusion, now. You won't make it otherwise." But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my lips trembling. Can you sign the forms?" I asked, looking at the only people in the room I trusted, my family. Karen, my mother, 42, her face hard and unmoving, shook her head. "No, we won't do it." Her words hit me like a cold wave. My father, Richard, 45, stood silently beside her, nodding. My little brother Jake, 14, hid behind his sleeve, his eyes wide, too scared to speak. "Let nature take its course," my mother added. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight. How could they let this happen? How could the people who raised me, who swore they loved me, just refuse? As I lay there, weakness overtaking me, flashes of memories hit me. Playing soccer with friends, helping Jake with homework, laughing with my family at last year's holiday dinner. How was I going to survive if my own blood, my own life, was being treated like it didn't matter? The nurses whispered between themselves. The doctor's urgency grew. Machines beeped faster, alarms cutting through the sterile hospital air. Every second stretched into an eternity. My vision blurred. I felt my strength slipping. Somewhere in that chaos, I realized I had to fight. Not just for the blood, but for someone to finally see me, to recognize I was on the edge of something irreversible. And then I asked again, desperate, my voice barely a whisper. "Please, someone, anyone, sign the forms." But their eyes didn't soften. Their answer was the same, cold, absolute, unyielding. And in that moment, lying there, I felt a terrifying thought creep into my mind. What if no one comes through for me? That's when Sophie, my best friend, appeared, rushing down the hall, and everything was about to change. I opened my eyes to the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room. Everything smelled of antiseptic. The machines beeped steadily, but to me, it sounded like a countdown. My body felt heavy, weak, almost unreal. Every inch of me ached. Every movement felt like dragging a stone. I tried to focus on something familiar, my family, but instead, I saw their faces like statues. My mother, Karen, 42, sat stiffly in a chair near my bedside, arms crossed. Her lips pressed together like she was holding back something. My father, Richard, 45, leaned against the wall, hands in pockets, silent and unreadable. Jake, my little brother, 14, was hovering near the door, his eyes wide, chewing his fingernails. I tried to speak, my voice barely audible. "Why won't you sign the forms? I need this. I could die." Karen's face didn't soften. "Emily, we're not doing it. You have to accept what happens naturally." The words felt like ice. My heart hammered. I couldn't understand. Why? She had been the one who tucked me in at night when I was sick, the one who celebrated every victory with me. Now, she was refusing to save my life. The doctors hovered nearby, whispering urgent updates, trying to maintain calm, but I could hear the panic in their voices. "Her blood pressure is dropping. Her oxygen levels are falling. We need consent immediately." I glanced at my father, hoping for support, but he just looked down at his shoes. I felt a surge of anger, betrayal, and helplessness all at once. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body was already weakening. Then I remembered Sophie, my best friend, 17, always quick to act, always protective. My mind clung to that hope like a lifeline. If my family won't help me, maybe someone else will. Flashbacks of the past week flooded me, playing soccer, laughing with friends, helping Jake with homework, sharing secrets with Sophie. Life felt so fragile, so unfairly close to slipping away. The nurses glanced at each other nervously. One whispered, "We might have to involve authorities if they continue to refuse." The tension in the room thickened. I could feel my pulse slowing, the fear tightening around my chest. Would I really be left here, helpless, while the people I loved chose to let me die? Then, just as my vision began to blur, a sound came from the hallway, a hurried voice, echoing like a lifeline. "Emily, we can't wait any longer!" Time felt like it had stopped. Every second stretched into an eternity as I lay on the hospital bed, pale and trembling. My body was growing weaker by the minute. Dizziness made my vision swim. Every attempt to lift my hand felt like lifting a mountain. The monitors beeped frantically, alarms cutting through the sterile air. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. And then Sophie burst through the door. Her face was flushed from running, her dark hair sticking to her forehead. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt the first spark of hope in what felt like forever. "Emily!" she yelled, rushing to my side. "Why isn't anyone helping you?" My mother's eyes narrowed. "This is our decision. You need to leave." But Sophie wasn't about to back down. Her voice trembled with anger and fear. "You can't just sit here and let her die. I'm calling the authorities if you don't sign these forms right now." A cold silence fell over the room. I watched my parents exchange tense glances. My father's face was pale, his jaw tight. My mother's hand tightened around her chair. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. The nurses and doctors moved faster now, preparing the blood for transfusion. One doctor whispered to Sophie, "We can administer under emergency consent laws if the parents refuse, but it has to be immediate." Every heartbeat felt like a hammer striking my chest. My body was failing me, and yet adrenaline surged through my veins. My mind was a whirlwind of fear, betrayal, and relief that Sophie was here. Could she really save me? Would they actually let it happen? My little brother Jake clung to Sophie's arm, wide-eyed, silent. It was a small but powerful reminder that I wasn't completely alone, that someone still cared. I tried to focus on my breathing, but panic made it impossible. My life literally hung in the balance, and the room was filled with tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Was this really happening? Could someone really override my family's decision in time? And then, Sophie picked up her phone, her fingers shaking but determined. "I'm calling the authorities. She won't die today, not on our watch." The doctors exchanged a tense look. Nurses hovered, ready to act the second legal clearance came through. My vision was blurring, my hands slipping from the bed rails. My chest tightened painfully, every breath a struggle. My body felt like it was slipping away. Every heartbeat was a struggle. My limbs were heavy, my vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to beg, to make someone, anyone, save me, but my voice barely reached a whisper. "Please, don't let me die." The room was a whirlwind of motion. Nurses moved quickly, blood bags and IV lines clinking as they prepared the transfusion. Sophie stood by my side, holding my hand so tightly I could feel her fear and determination through every pulse. Her eyes were locked on my parents. "This isn't up for debate anymore. Emily is getting the transfusion," she said, voice steady, unwavering. Karen and Richard exchanged glances, and for the first time, I saw hesitation. The reality hit them. If I died, it wouldn't just be heartbreak. It could be legal trouble, social scrutiny, the guilt that would never leave them. My mother's eyes flicked to the floor. My father swallowed hard. Neither of them said a word. The doctor leaned closer, whispering to the nurses. "We can start under emergency consent now. She's critical." Machines beeped faster, alarms cutting through my foggy consciousness. I could feel my chest tightening, my energy draining like sand, slipping through fingers. Sophie squeezed my hand. "You're going to be okay, Emily. I promise. Just hang on." Her voice was both comforting and urgent. My little brother Jake peeked from the doorway, wide-eyed, clutching the edge of the bed rail. For the first time, I realized how many people I had who truly cared, even if my parents didn't. The nurses set the IV line. The cold touch of the blood bag against my arm made me shiver, but relief flooded me. Life, real, tangible life, was coming back into me. My heartbeat began to steady slightly as the transfusion started. I could feel energy returning, slowly, like tiny sparks reigniting in my body. The doctors monitored my vitals closely, whispering reassurances. Sophie stayed beside me, brushing hair from my damp forehead, refusing to leave even for a second. The tension that had gripped the room finally began to ease, a little. The transfusion continued, each drop of blood feeling like a second chance at life. Slowly, my body began to respond. My color returned, my pulse steadied, and the dizzy fog that had consumed me started to lift. I could finally open my eyes fully and see the reality around me. Sophie was still holding my hand, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes were bright with relief. I squeezed her hand weakly, a shaky smile forming on my lips. "You saved me," I whispered, and she just shook her head. "No, we saved you together." The doctors monitored my vitals closely, explaining that if I had waited even a few more minutes, it might have been too late. Every word they spoke felt like both a warning and a miracle. I had survived. My life had been hanging by a thread, and someone had fought for me. Karen and Richard stood to the side, silent, their faces pale and drawn. The reality of their refusal hit them in a way words couldn't undo. The hospital staff explained that, legally, they could have faced severe consequences if I had not survived. Social workers were called to discuss mandatory counseling for them, emphasizing the seriousness of their actions. The emotional weight of what had happened settled over the room like a storm. I couldn't ignore the emotions swirling inside me: relief, fear, betrayal, anger, but above all, a sense of clarity. My parents had made a choice that nearly cost me everything. Sophie, Jake, and even the doctors had been my lifeline. I realized who I could truly rely on and who I couldn't. In the days that followed, Karen and Richard underwent counseling to address their rigid beliefs and the danger their decision had caused. I, meanwhile, slowly recovered physically and emotionally. The bond between me and Sophie grew even stronger, and Jake's quiet support reminded me of the family connections that still mattered. Socially, my story spread among close friends and relatives, reinforcing the lesson. Sometimes survival depends on those willing to stand up when others won't. The most important moment, though, was when I sat quietly in my hospital room one afternoon, the sun streaming through the window, and felt the weight lift off my chest. I was alive. I was safe. And I knew that moving forward, I would never let anyone's decision put my life at risk again. Life hadn't returned to normal, and my family relationships had changed forever, but I had survived. I had been tested in ways I never imagined, and I had come out stronger. My heartbeat was steady now, my body rested, and my spirit, though shaken, was unbroken. For the first time since that terrifying night, I could breathe fully, feeling both relief and resolution. The lesson was clear. Survival often depends on courage, advocacy, and the people willing to fight for you when the odds seem insurmountable. And I had survived.